Listen, just listen. There is no grand overture tonight, no clash of swords or proclamations from a throne. The story begins not with a sound, but with the profound lack of it. It is the deep, hollow quiet that greets you first, long before your eyes even open. You are lying on a straw mattress, the kind that always feels vaguely damp no matter the season, and the wool blanket is a coarse, scratchy weight upon you. The air in your small, timber-framed room is cold enough to see your breath, and it carries the layered scent of old wood smoke, unwashed linen, and a faint, sweetish odor you've learned not to think about too closely. This is the morning, but the usual chorus of the city awakening is missing. There is no distant shouting of vendors setting up their stalls, no rumble of 100 carts, no laughter from the children in the alley. There is only this heavy, pressing silence. Slowly you sit up, the ropes of your bed creaking in protest, a sound that seems impossibly loud in the stillness. You look around the small space that is your home. The chair by the hearth, where your brother used to sit, is empty. It has been empty for 3 weeks. His boots are still by the door, gathering a fine layer of dust. A silent, stubborn testament to a journey with no return. You find yourself counting things that are no longer in use. A wooden spoon, a half-mended fishing net, a worn leather jerkin hanging from a peg. It's a strange and morbid inventory, this accounting of absence. The silence in your home isn't peaceful. It's a presence. A thick, suffocating blanket woven from the threads of conversations that will never happen again. Living here is like sharing a room with a ghost, or perhaps with a whole crowd of them. Stepping outside is a physical shock. The damp, clinging fog of late autumn greets you like a wet cloth to the face. It blurs the edges of the world, making the already narrow, muddy lane feel even more claustrophobic. And then the smell hits you. It is the true ruler of this city. A complex and inescapable perfume. At the bottom is the ancient aroma of mud and animal waste, a smell as old as the city itself. Layered on top is the acrid bite of 1,000 smoky chimneys burning damp wood and peat, but woven through it all is the new scent, the one that defines this era. The cloying, sickly sweetness of decay, hastily masked by the sharp herbal smell of vinegar and the bitter incense that burns in front of the houses marked with a crude, painted cross. You begin to walk, your worn leather shoes making a squelching sound in the thick, dark mud that serves as a street. There are no other footsteps to accompany yours. You look at the doors as you pass. Some are shut tight, with a stark white cross painted on the wood. A warning, a plea, a tombstone. Others are simply boarded over, the occupants having fled or not. You see a few other figures in the mist, but they move like you do, heads down, shoulders hunched, pulling their cloaks tight around them, as if the fabric could somehow filter the air itself. No one meets your gaze. To look at someone is to acknowledge them, and to acknowledge them is to acknowledge their potential to be a vessel of the pestilence, a walking carrier of the invisible terror that drifts on every breath. Eventually you reach what used to be the market square. It's a shadow of its former self, a ghost of commerce. A few lonely stalls are scattered across the vast, muddy expanse, their owners huddled and watchful. A woman sells onions and withered carrots from a cart, her face a mask of suspicion. A butcher has a few sad-looking cuts of meat laid out, buzzing with fat, black flies that seem to be the only creatures thriving in this new world. There's no haggling, no friendly banter. Transactions are conducted in near silence, coins dropped into a wooden bowl of vinegar, goods left on the edge of the stall for you to pick up. It's a strange, choreographed dance of mutual distrust, a medieval precursor to the self-checkout line, only with infinitely higher stakes. You find yourself drawn to the dim, smoky interior of a tavern, seeking not company, but the illusion of it. The air inside is thick with the smell of stale ale, sweat, and a desperate cloying perfume worn by a woman in the corner. The place is half full, but the mood is not one of cheer. It is a strange cocktail of despair and frantic, reckless abandon. In one corner, a group of men gamble with dice, their movements jerky and loud, their laughter too sharp. They are playing for coins that belonged to their dead relatives only a month ago. A sudden, grim inheritance. They drink as if the ale itself is a cure, a way to flush the fear from their bodies, or perhaps to simply be too numb to feel it when the sickness finally comes for them. You take a seat at a rough-hewn wooden table, its surface sticky with the ghosts of 1,000 spilled drinks. You don't speak to anyone, and no one speaks to you. You are all just islands in a sea of shared dread. A man at the table next to yours begins to cough, a dry, hacking sound that cuts through the low murmur of the room. A sudden, complete silence falls. Every eye darts towards him, not with sympathy, but with cold, calculating fear. He tries to stifle the cough, his face turning a deep red, but another one escapes, louder this time. The tavern keeper, a large man with a face like a slab of meat, walks over, his expression unreadable. He doesn't say a word, just points a thick finger toward the door. The coughing man, shame and terror warring on his face, quickly gets up and scurries out into the fog. The spell is broken, and the low chatter resumes, but it is more strained now, more fragile. By mid-afternoon, the fog is condensed into a miserable, bone-chilling rain. It falls not in a torrent, but as a steady, weeping drizzle that seems to wash all the color from the world, leaving only infinite shades of gray and brown. The streets, already quiet, are now utterly deserted. The rain turns the mud into a slick, treacherous soup, and each drop that lands on your wool cloak seems to carry the weight of the sky's sorrow. You find yourself huddling in the archway of a church, the stone cold and damp against your back. From here, you watch the world dissolve. The rain runs in brown rivulets down the cobblestones, carrying with it the filth and refuse of the city, a grim baptism for a world that feels beyond saving. If this quiet journey into the past offers you a strange sort of peace, feel free to leave a like, but only if you truly feel it. You see a figure approaching through the downpour, a man of some wealth by the look of his fine, albeit soaked, cloak. He is holding a pomander, a perforated metal ball, to his nose, sniffing at it with a frantic intensity, as if it were the very source of life. You know what's inside, a concoction of ambergris, cloves, and other expensive spices. A personal air filter for the rich, based on the belief that the plague is a miasma, a foul vapor. It is a desperate, fragrant piece of magical thinking, a ridiculously expensive attempt to smell his way to safety in a world where the very air has been declared an enemy. He hurries past, his face a mask of grim determination, oblivious to you, another shadow in the rain. As dusk begins to bleed into the gray afternoon, you make your way back to your small, silent home. The fading light plays tricks on the eyes, turning familiar shapes into monstrous silhouettes. The gnarled branch of a tree looks like a skeletal hand. A pile of discarded rags in an alley takes on the form of a slumped body. You walk faster, your heart a nervous drum against your ribs. The greatest fear is not of thieves or cutthroats. They seem to have been thinned out just like everyone else, but of the encroaching darkness. The night air is considered the most dangerous, the time when the pestilential vapors are thought to be at their thickest and most malevolent. Reaching your own door feels like reaching a sanctuary, however fragile. Inside, you bolt the heavy wooden door and stuff a rag into the gap at the bottom, a flimsy and pathetic ritual against an invisible invader. You build up the fire in the hearth, its crackling and hissing a welcome companion in the oppressive silence. The flickering orange light dances across the room, casting long, wavering shadows that seem to writhe and twist in the corners of your vision. This small circle of warmth is your entire universe now. You eat a simple meal of hard bread and a piece of cheese, chewing slowly, making it last. There is nothing else to do. No books to read for a common person like you, no music to listen to. There is only the fire, your own thoughts, and the profound, unnerving quiet of a city holding its breath. Later, as you lie on your straw mattress once more, the sounds of the night are a terrifying form of communication. The rain has stopped, and the silence is even deeper than before. You strain your ears, listening for any sign of life from the houses nearby. You used to hear the snores of the baker next door, the occasional cry of the weaver's new baby across the lane. Tonight, there is nothing. Not a single sound. The absence of noise is a message in itself, a story told in negative space. How long has it been since you heard the baby cry? 2 days? 3? You close your eyes. but sleep is a distant shore. You are simply adrift, in the dark, in the quiet, trying to remember what a normal world even sounded like. If you find your own thoughts beginning to drift, and your breathing slowing to match the rhythm of this story, feel free to comment the time when you finally fell asleep. The dawn, if you can call it that, arrives not as a burst of light, but as a slow dilution of the darkness. The black of the sky softens to a bruised purple, then to a tired, washed-out gray. Another day has begun, and with it, the quiet, desperate machinery of survival must grind back into motion. You leave the cold comfort of your room, the silence of your own home pressing at your back, and step once more into the wider silence of the city. But today, you find yourself listening for something else, not for the sounds that are missing, but for the few that remain. You are searching for the faint, stubborn heartbeats of a world that refuses to completely die, the rhythms of those who must still work, who must still toil, because to stop would be a surrender of a different kind. Your feet carry you toward the Weavers' district, a part of the city once known for its constant clatter and hum. Now the quiet is thick, but it is not absolute. From behind a shuttered window you hear it, a low, rhythmic whirring, a sound like a giant, sleeping insect. You push open the heavy, unoiled door and step into a room thick with the dusty animal scent of raw wool and the faint, sharp smell of human sweat. The air is a snowstorm of floating fibers, catching the weak light from a single grime-coated window. In the center of the room, a woman sits at a spinning wheel. She is old, her back a permanent curve, her face a web of deep-set lines. She does not look up as you enter. Her entire world has been reduced to the task at hand, her focus absolute. Her hands, you notice, are not the hands of a person but the tools of a trade. The skin is cracked and stained with dye, the knuckles swollen, the fingers moving with a deft, unconscious grace. One hand feeds a steady stream of carded wool toward the spindle, while the other guides the tension, her foot pumping the treadle in a steady, unceasing rhythm. Whir pump, whir pump. The sound is the only clock in this room, measuring out the seconds of her life in lengths of thread. She is making yarn for clothes that will be worn by people who may not be alive next month, for shrouds to wrap the bodies of those who have already fallen. It is a strange, futile kind of hope, spinning thread for a future that seems to unravel faster than she can create it. She works for what feels like an eternity, the pile of spun yarn on the bobbin growing almost imperceptibly. Finally, the rhythm breaks. She stops pumping the treadle, the wheel slowing with a final, weary sigh. She reaches for a wooden cup of water, her hand trembling slightly from the strain. She takes a slow, deliberate sip, her eyes staring at the wall, but seeing nothing. Beside the cup is a small, hard crust of dark bread, her meal for the next several hours. She does not eat it yet. She simply sits, gathering herself, her body a study in profound exhaustion. Then, with a deep sigh that seems to pull up from the very floorboards, her foot finds the treadle again. The wheel begins its slow, hypnotic turn, and the thread of her life continues to be spun. Whir, pump, whir, pump. You leave her to her solitary labor and walk on, the sound of the spinning wheel fading behind you until it is just a memory. Soon a new sensation reaches you, heat. A wave of dry, oppressive heat that seems to suck the moisture from the air. It leads you to the baker's alley, where a man is working in a space that is little more than a brick-lined cave. He is stripped to the waist, his torso pale and slick with sweat, his arms and chest dusted with a fine layer of flour that looks like powdered bone. He stands before a massive wooden trough, his body heaving with effort as he kneads a mountain of dough. He is not just a baker, he is a wrestler, locked in a primal struggle with this living, breathing mass of flour and water. He grunts with each movement, a low, guttural sound of pure physical exertion. He pushes the dough away from him with the heels of his hands, then folds the great pale slab back over on itself, turns it, and pushes again. His muscles bunch and strain, his whole body a single lever of force. The air is thick with the yeasty, slightly sour smell of the proving dough and the scorching heat radiating from the great brick oven that glows. with a malevolent orange light in the back of the shop. He bakes less than half of what he used to, yet his work is twice as hard. His last 2 apprentices are gone, vanished into the plague's silent embrace, leaving him to do the work of 3 men, all alone. His break is a brief, gasping affair. He leans against the flour-dusted wall, his chest rising and falling like a bellows, sweat carving clean paths through the white dust on his skin. He ladles water from a bucket and drinks it straight from the wooden dipper, the water spilling down his chin and chest. He looks at the oven, then at the dough, his expression not one of pride, but of a weary resignation. This is his life, a constant battle against heat and exhaustion, to produce the one thing everyone still needs, the one thing that separates a bad day from a truly desperate one: bread. He picks up a small, slightly burnt loaf from yesterday's bake, tears a piece off with his teeth, and chews it without joy. Then he turns back to the trough. He pushes, folds, and turns. Pushes, folds, and turns. You continue your journey, moving toward the river that cuts through the city like a muddy scar. The air grows cooler here, heavy with the scent of damp earth, rotting vegetation, and the unmistakable, oily smell of fish. Out on the gray, sluggish water, a single, small boat is anchored. In it, a man stands, casting a weighted net into the current. The movement is practiced, a fluid arc of motion that sends the net flying out over the water, where it lands with a soft splash. He is a portrait of isolation, a lone figure in a vast, indifferent landscape. The river, once busy with merchant barges and fishing crews calling to one another, is now unnervingly empty. It is just him, his boat, and the silent, polluted water. He waits, his body still, his eyes fixed on the spot where the net sank. The silence out on the river is different from the silence in the city. It is deeper, more ancient. It is the quiet of a world that has forgotten humanity. He seems less like a man and more like a heron, a creature of pure, patient instinct. After a time, he begins to pull the net in, hand over laborious hand, the wet, heavy rope coiling at his feet. The strain is visible in the cords of his neck and the set of his jaw. He is pulling against the weight of the water, the drag of the current, and the crushing weight of a world with too few customers. The net breaks the surface, and you can see the meager results of his labor. A few small silver fish writhe in the mesh, a pathetic catch for so much effort. He untangles them with numb, cold fingers, tossing them into a wooden bucket at his feet, where they flap and gasp in their final moments. He doesn't celebrate or curse. His face is a blank mask of acceptance. He eats his own meager meal without leaving his post, a piece of hard, salted fish from a previous day's catch, its flesh tough and chewy, the taste of salt and river mud filling his mouth. Then he picks up the net, he coils the rope, swings his body, and with that same practiced, fluid motion, he casts it out again into the gray water, hoping for a better result that will likely never come. Leaving the river behind, your path takes you toward the hills at the edge of the city, where the earth has been wounded, scarred with the dark mouths of mine shafts. Here, the work is not of creation, but of extraction. You see them before you hear them, a small group of men emerging from a tunnel in the hillside. They do not look like men. They are figures of soot and clay, their clothes, their skin, their hair, all caked with the same uniform layer of black dust. Only the whites of their eyes and the pink of their mouths seem to belong to the living. They walk slowly, their bodies bent, their movements stiff with a deep, bone-wearying exhaustion. One of them stops, leaning against the timber frame of the mine entrance. He begins to cough. It is not a normal cough. It is a deep, rattling, wet sound that seems to tear its way up from the bottom of his lungs, a sound full of gravel and despair. He spits a thick, black substance onto the ground. It is the price of his labor, a piece of his own life paid for a few chunks of coal. There is no cure for this sickness, the one that comes from the dust, and it is a far slower and more certain killer than the pestilence. The others don't look at him with fear, as they would a plague victim, but with a kind of grim, shared understanding. This is their future, too. They share a loaf of bread and a water skin, their black hands leaving smudges on the pale crust. Their conversation is sparse, spoken in low murmurs, their voices raspy from the dust. They speak of a collapsed timber, a flooded shaft, a vein of coal that ran dry. One of them is a boy, no older than 14, though his face is old, his eyes hollow. He has been in the mines for 5 years, since he was strong enough to drag a wicker basket. He chews his bread slowly, his gaze fixed on the dark hole from which he just emerged, the place he will have to re-enter in a few short hours. There is no escape. The darkness is his home, his workplace, and, eventually, his tomb. After their short rest, they pick up their tools, their faces set, and descend once more into the black, unforgiving earth. As you wander back into the maze of city streets, you hear a strange, scratching sound, accompanied by a dislodged pebble clattering down a rooftop. You look up and see him, a small, impossibly thin boy, his limbs like sticks, perched precariously on the peak of a tall, timber-framed house. He is a chimney sweep, and he is emerging from the top of a chimney stack, his body so covered in soot that he seems to be a creature born of smoke and shadow. He stands there for a moment, a dark silhouette against the gray sky, looking out over the city. From his vantage point, he can see the whole sad panorama, the empty streets, the houses marked with crosses, the smoke rising from a few scattered hearths. He begins his descent, his bare feet and hands finding purchase on the steep, slippery roof tiles with the confidence of a squirrel. It is a dangerous, terrifying job, one reserved for the smallest and most desperate of children, those who can fit their emaciated bodies into the narrow, suffocating flue. You can imagine the journey up, the total darkness, the choking soot, the rough brick scraping his skin, the constant fear of getting stuck, of being buried alive in a vertical grave of brick and ash. He has paid a pittance to prevent the wealthy from having their houses burned down, a tiny, disposable human tool. He reaches the edge of the roof and shimmies down a rope, landing with a soft thud in the alley below. He stands, brushing clouds of soot from his ragged tunic. A woman gives him a thin coin and a piece of stale oatcake. He gnaws on it, his white teeth a startling contrast to his blackened face. He doesn't seem tired or scared, just empty. He has done this so many times that the terror has been worn away, leaving only a hollow core of duty. He looks at the next house on his list, a grand merchant's home with 3 tall chimneys, and shoulders his bag of brushes. He will climb into the darkness again, and then again, another small ghost haunting the rooftops of a city of ghosts. The slow, rhythmic clopping of hooves on cobblestone draws your attention next, a sound of normalcy that feels jarring and out of place. It is a carter, guiding a single, tired-looking horse that pulls a large, 2-wheeled cart. But the cart is not filled with grain or barrels of ale or bundles of firewood. It is filled with the dead. The bodies are wrapped in simple linen shrouds, their forms still vaguely human, piled one on top of the other in a grotesque jumble of limbs. The carter is a large, stoic man, with a thick beard and eyes that have seen too much to show any emotion at all. He wears a heavy leather apron, and a cloth is tied over his nose and mouth, soaked in what you can only guess is vinegar. He calls out in a low, monotone voice, a voice devoid of inflection or feeling. "Bring out your dead." The words hang in the damp air, a chilling invitation. A door opens, and 2 men, their faces etched with grief, carry out a small, shrouded bundle and place it gently onto the cart. No words are exchanged. No coins are passed. This is not a service for pay. It is a grim necessity, a municipal function in a city whose primary export is now corpses. The carter gives a slight nod, a barely perceptible acknowledgement of their shared, awful reality, and then clicks his tongue, urging the horse to move on. He stops every few houses, the grim process repeating itself. The cart grows fuller, the mound of the dead rising higher. These are not statistics to him. They are his neighbors. That one was the tanner's wife. That small bundle was the cooper's youngest son. He knows them, or he knew them. But he has built a wall inside himself, a place where feeling cannot reach, because to feel the weight of everybody he collects would be to be crushed by it. His only break is to take a long pull from a wineskin, the cheap, sour wine, a temporary anesthetic for his soul. He continues his slow, methodical journey toward the plague pits outside the city walls, the horse's hooves keeping a steady, funereal beat on the stones. In a courtyard, away from the main thoroughfares, you find a group of women. They are laundresses, gathered around large wooden tubs of steaming water. The air is thick with the harsh chemical smell of lye and the damp, heavy scent of wet linen. Their work is punishing. They scrub clothes on washboards, their knuckles raw, their arms submerged to the elbows in scalding water. They wring out heavy sheets and blankets, their bodies twisting with the effort, their faces grim and determined. They are washing the bed sheets of the sick, the clothes of the dead, a constant hands-on confrontation with the very fabric of the pestilence. They work in a strange silence, punctuated only by the rhythmic sloshing of water and the scrape of brushes against cloth. There is no gossip, no singing, none of the chatter that once defined a place like this. Each woman is locked in her own world of repetitive motion, her thoughts her only company. They are paid more than ever before for this dangerous work. But the money feels like a curse, a payment for dancing with death. They are pariahs, performing a vital task that makes them untouchable to everyone else. They are cleaning the city's wounds, all while knowing the infection could seep into their own skin at any moment. One of the women stops, her hands resting on the edge of the tub. She stares into the gray, soapy water, her expression lost. Perhaps she is thinking of the person whose shirt she just washed, a young man she saw walking in the market only a week ago. Perhaps she is thinking of her own children, and the risk she brings home to them with every coin she earns. She dips a piece of hard cheese into a small pot of mustard, a sharp, pungent meal meant to cut through the foulness of her work. She eats it quickly, mechanically. Then she plunges her red, aching hands back into the hot water, and the rhythmic, relentless scrubbing begins once more. The sound follows you as you walk away, a soft, wet, percussive reminder of the endless, thankless work of cleaning up a dying world. You begin to realize that the pestilence, for all its terrifying efficiency, is not the only monster that stalks these streets. It is simply the loudest, the one that gets all the attention. The world, you see, was already a finely tuned machine for maiming and killing people long before the great mortality arrived. It was just a bit more creative about it. The chimney sweep you saw, the boy made of soot and shadow, you hear a story of one just like him who got stuck in a narrow flue a few streets over. They heard his cries for a day, then they heard nothing. They had to partially dismantle the chimney to retrieve the body. The baker, wrestling with his dough, works next to an oven so hot that a single misstep, a moment of dizzy exhaustion, could mean a burn that would fester and kill him in a week. The world is a tapestry of mundane, everyday lethality, a series of absurdly simple ways to die that have nothing to do with the plague. The dangers are not just in the air or in the accidents of labor. They are on your plate. You buy a loaf of bread from a stall, and it feels heavier than it should, unnaturally dense. You break it open, and the inside is a startling, pristine white, a color that honest, stone-ground flour rarely achieves. The baker, his own family thin and hungry, has learned the art of illusion. He has stretched his precious flour with anything that will add bulk and whiteness, chalk dust, powdered limestone, or the cheap, slightly metallic-tasting alum. You are, in essence, eating the street. Each bite is a gritty, joyless mouthful of sustenance and geology, a strange communion with the very minerals that will one day cover your own grave. It is perhaps the most honest transaction in the city. You pay for bread and you receive a small piece of your own tombstone. And what will you wash this down with? A cup of milk from a woman who swears it came from the cow this very morning. But it is thin and bluish, with a watery consistency that doesn't coat the cup. She has doubled her supply by adding water from the communal well, the same well where everyone washes everything. To hide the dilution, she might have stirred in a bit of that same chalk dust, or if she was particularly creative, a paste made from boiled sheep's brains to restore a semblance of creamy thickness. Or perhaps you'll have ale, the supposed liquid bread of the common man. But the brewer, short on grain, has made a weak, sour batch. To give it a kick, to make you feel like you're getting your penny's worth, he might add strange herbs, some of which are harmless, and some of which, like henbane, can make you feel quite dizzy and pleasant right before they make you feel quite dead. The butcher's stall is a masterclass in morbid theater. The few cuts of meat he has are a suspicious shade of brown, but he has rubbed them with animal blood to restore a blush of life, and a heavy dusting of pepper and cloves fights a losing war against a faint, sweetish undertone of decay. He offers you a sausage, a mystery of ground-up organs and breadcrumbs, so heavily spiced you could never identify the primary ingredient even if you wanted to, which you most certainly do not. This is the new economy of consumption, a desperate dance where the seller unloads food that is on the verge of becoming poison, and the buyer purchases it, knowing the risk, because the alternative is the slow, grinding certainty of starvation. It's not so much a meal as it is a calculated gamble with your own digestive system. Faced with an invisible enemy and a world of poison, the search for a cure becomes a frantic, desperate art form. You see the barber surgeon's shop, its striped pole like a candy cane of blood and bandages. Inside, the cure for the plague's fever, believed to be an excess of hot, moist blood, is to simply remove the blood. Men sit in chairs, their arms bleeding into bowls, their faces pale and clammy. The surgeon, a man who knows more about trimming beards than healing bodies, applies leeches to their skin, small black slugs that grow fat and bloated on the very vitality the patient needs to survive. The theory is perfect in its circular, medieval logic. To cure a disease that weakens you to the point of death, you must first be artificially weakened. It is a race to see what will claim the patient first, the sickness or the cure. If you have coin, you can buy potions, each more exotic and less effective than the last. The apothecary, his eyes gleaming with the fervor of a true believer or an excellent salesman, will offer you a theriac. It is a thick, dark, treacly substance, a secret recipe containing dozens of ingredients. For the wealthy, it might include powdered emeralds and crushed pearls. For you, the recipe is more rustic. It is a blend of dried toad, viper's flesh, bitter herbs, and perhaps a generous pinch of arsenic, because it is well known that one poison can drive out another. You drink the foul-smelling concoction, its taste a war of bitterness and decay on your tongue. The greatest ingredient, of course, is your own desperation, the one thing that allows you to believe that this vile sludge is anything more than an expensive and imaginative way to upset your stomach. You hear whispers of a new method, one of singular and spectacular absurdity. It is said that if you take a live chicken, pluck the feathers from its backside, and strap it firmly to a plague sore, the swollen, painful bubo in the armpit or groin, the chicken will act as a natural pump, drawing the pestilence out of the body. You pass a house where they are trying it. Through an open shutter, you see a man lying on a bed, delirious with fever, and his wife is grimly holding a frantic, squawking hen against his leg. The belief is that the chicken will sicken and die, its life a sacrifice for the humans. It is a moment of such profound, desperate madness, a fusion of folk magic and agricultural reality, that you can only stand and stare. The cure for the end of the world, apparently, is a chicken's bare bottom. Then there are those who seek a more spiritual remedy. One afternoon, you hear a sound carried on the wind, a low, rhythmic chanting punctuated by a wet, slapping noise. It is the flagellants. They march into the city square, a procession of men in dark hoods, their backs bared to the weeping sky. They are stripped to the waist, and in their hands they carry leather scourges tipped with iron. In a synchronized, hypnotic rhythm, they bring the whips down upon their own shoulders and backs again and again, chanting prayers for mercy. Their skin is a raw, bloody mess, a testament to their belief that the plague is God's divine punishment, a scourge upon a sinful world. They believe that by scourging themselves, by taking God's punishment into their own hands, they can appease His wrath. The irony lost on them is that their bloody open wounds and their travels from one infected town to the next make them one of the most efficient possible vectors for spreading the very disease they are trying to repent for. When the cures fail and the penance goes unanswered, the fear needs somewhere else to go. It needs a focus, a face to blame. And so, the whispers begin. They start in the taverns and market stalls, quiet and venomous. The wells, they say, have been poisoned. And who would do such a thing? The city's small Jewish community becomes the target of this desperate, terrified rage. People who have been your neighbors for years are suddenly looked upon with suspicion and hatred. Their separateness, once a matter of custom, is now twisted into proof of a secret, malevolent conspiracy. It is the oldest and most tired trick of a terrified populace, finding a scapegoat. It is a cure not for the body, but for the mind, a way to transform a random, faceless horror into a simple, satisfying story of good versus evil. The disease, of course, continues its work, utterly indifferent to human narratives. You return to your room as night falls, the world outside a theater of dangers, both real and imagined. You have a choice for your meager supper. You can eat the bread that is part stone, drink the ale that is part illusion, or pray to a God who communicates only through a profound and terrifying silence. You bolt the door not just against the pestilential air, but against the sheer, overwhelming absurdity of it all. In a world where the healers bleed you, the bakers feed you rocks, and the pious whip themselves to death, the single, quiet act of surviving another day feels less like a victory and more like a cosmic joke whose punchline you have not yet understood. You begin to understand that survival in this new world is a matter of grim statistics, a game of chance where the rules are written in a language you cannot read. The pestilence is the headline, the spectacular, attention-grabbing catastrophe that has emptied the streets and silenced the church bells. But beneath this loud, screaming terror are the old, quiet killers, the familiar ghosts who have always haunted the bedsides of the poor and the unlucky. They are still at their work, diligent and methodical, and in this weakened world their harvest is more bountiful than ever. You see a man, once a robust stonemason, now a hollow-eyed specter, leaning against a wall, his body racked by a deep, wet cough. This is not the sudden fever of the plague. This is the consumption, a far more intimate and patient assassin. It has been eating him from the inside out for years, a slow, methodical hollowing of the lungs, turning them into a useless, bloody sponge. Each cough brings up a fleck of his own life, a small crimson payment on a debt that can only be settled by death. You pass a woman lying in an alley, her skin burning with fever, her eyes wide with a frantic, unseeing terror. She plucks at her threadbare blanket with trembling fingers, muttering to people who are not there. A faint reddish rash, like a scattering of crushed berries, mottles her chest and back. This is not the plague's signature bubo, but the mark of typhus, the jail fever that has escaped its prison walls and now walks freely among the populace. It is a disease born of filth, carried in the bodies of the tiny lice that thrive in the unwashed clothes and crowded rooms of the city. It is a swift and brutal sickness, a fire in the blood that burns the mind to ash, leaving the body a twitching, delirious husk. The irony is grimly amusing. In a city that has become a prison of fear for everyone, jail fever is no longer a selective affliction. It is an equal opportunity employer of death. Then there is the pox, the old, dreaded enemy of the young. You see a child sitting on a doorstep, his face a swollen, monstrous mask of weeping sores. It begins as a simple fever, but soon the skin blossoms with the disease's cruel flowers. Red spots that swell into blisters, pustules filled with a thick yellowish fluid, each one a tiny, burning world of pain. If he survives, and many do not, he will carry the map of his ordeal on his face for the rest of his life, his skin a pitted, scarred landscape. He may be blinded, his eyes clouded over by the same sores that cover his body. The plague is a swift executioner, but the pox is a meticulous torturer, one that delights in leaving its signature carved into the very flesh of those who have the misfortune to endure it and live. It's a lifelong receipt for having survived, a permanent reminder of a debt paid in innocence. And you cannot forget the most common and undignified of assassins, the flux, the food poisoning that comes from the tainted meat, the watered milk, the bread cut with chalk. It is a rebellion of the body against the poison it has been fed. It is a violent, wrenching sickness that empties you out, leaving you a weak, dehydrated shell. The cramps are a hot, twisting knot in your gut, and the endless, watery purging is a humiliating surrender of all bodily control. In a world with no understanding of hydration, this simple, common ailment is a death sentence. You can survive the miasma in the air, you can avoid the touch of the sick, you can pray to every saint in the calendar, only to be laid low by a bad sausage. It is the universe's blackest joke, to die not with a roar of pestilence, but with the pathetic, gurgling whimper of a soured stomach. Eventually, the body's own fortress is breached, by one enemy or another. And when your small room becomes a prison of fever and pain, when you can no longer fetch your own water or feed yourself, there is one last place to go. It is not a place of healing. You must be very clear about that. It is a place of managed dying. You make the decision, or it is made for you, to go to the hospital. You stumble through the streets, or you are carried on a litter by neighbors who can no longer bear your cries, to a large, grim stone building that was once a monastery, a place of quiet contemplation. Now it is a place of concentrated suffering, an abbey of the afflicted. The sound reaches you first, a low, continuous hum of human misery, a sound that seems to seep from the very stones. Then the smell hits you, an invisible wall of such complex foulness that you retch. It is the smell of 100 sick, unwashed bodies packed together. It is the sour, metallic scent of blood and the sharp ammonia tang of urine. It is the cloying sweetness of infected wounds and the faint, unmistakable odor of human decay. Woven through it all is the futile, desperate counter-aroma of incense, vinegar, and burning herbs, a fragrant attempt to mask a stench that has become the building's very soul. You push open the heavy oak door and step inside. You have left the quiet city of ghosts and entered the loud, chaotic capital of the dying. The world narrows to this one, long hall. The sight is a vision from a fever dream. A vast, stone-floored room stretches before you, its high, vaulted ceiling lost in smoky shadows. Along both walls are rows upon rows of low, straw-filled pallets, so close together that they almost touch. On each pallet is a body, or what is left of one. Some are moaning, some are coughing, some are thrashing in delirium, and some are terrifyingly still. The air is thick with dust motes and flies, dancing in the weak shafts of light that penetrate the high, grime-coated windows. This is not a sanctuary. This is a warehouse for the dying, a final, crowded stop on the journey to the grave. The sheer volume of suffering is overwhelming, a physical weight that presses down on you. A figure in a dark, coarse habit approaches. It is a nun, her face pale and weary, a wimple framing features that have been scrubbed clean of all expression. She is not an angel of mercy. She is a functionary, an administrator in this bureaucratic antechamber to hell. Her eyes, deep-set and tired, assess you with a practiced, dispassionate gaze. She does not ask your name. She does not ask what ails you. She can see it. She can smell it. All that matters is whether you are still breathing. She points with a chapped, raw-looking hand toward an empty space between two pallets on the floor. That is your place now. That is your new home. You make your way to the designated spot, a small island of bare floor in a sea of sickness. There is no mattress, not even a spare blanket. You are expected to have brought your own, or to do without. You lie down on the cold, damp stone, the sounds and smells of your new neighbors enveloping you. To your right, a man wheezes, each breath a rattling liquid struggle. To your left, a woman weeps softly, a continuous, hopeless sound. You can feel the body heat radiating from them, smell the sour sweat of their fever. There is no privacy here, no dignity. You are all just cargo, waiting for your final shipment. The morning, such as it is, begins not with light, but with a change in the routine. The nuns move through the ward, their wooden sandals clattering on the stone floor. They carry buckets of a thin, grayish gruel, a watery porridge of oats or barley. One of them stops by your pallet and ladles a small amount into the wooden bowl you were wise enough to bring. It is warm, but tasteless, a sustenance of pure function, designed only to keep the flame of life flickering for a few more hours. You eat it slowly, your throat tight, the simple act of swallowing an enormous effort. You watch as the nun tries to spoon some of the gruel into the mouth of the weeping woman beside you, most of it dribbling down her chin. Later in the morning, a man of importance arrives. He is a physician, you can tell by his fine, fur-lined robes, and the pomander he holds fastidiously to his nose. He does not walk among the pallets. He stands at the entrance of the ward, his expression one of profound distaste, as if he were surveying a particularly troublesome livestock pen. He speaks in Latin to a senior monk, pointing a gloved finger at this patient or that. His voice a low, academic drone. He speaks of unbalanced humors, of choler and phlegm, of malignant astrological conjunctions. He is a man of immense learning and spectacular uselessness. His diagnosis is a performance, a ritual to affirm his own status. He does not touch a single patient. After the physician's theatrical departure, the barber surgeon arrives. He is the opposite of the physician, a man of little learning and brutal practicality. He carries a leather roll of tools, knives, saws, and a brass bowl. His job is not to diagnose, but to act. He moves to the bedside of a man with a raging fever, a man whose blood is believed to be too hot, too abundant. The surgeon wraps a leather strap around the man's arm, and the veins bulge. He takes out a small, sharp knife called a phleem, and with a quick, practiced motion, he opens a vein. The blood, dark and thick, spurts into the brass bowl. The patient, already weak, groans and seems to shrink, his face turning the color of wet parchment. The surgeon watches the bowl fill, his expression impassive, as if he were merely draining a barrel. The air in the ward thickens as midday approaches. The weak sunlight struggles to pierce the grime of the windows, illuminating the swirling dust and the lazy buzzing of flies. The collective sound of the room changes, the moans deepening, the coughs growing more frequent. It is the hour of the fever's peak. The heat from so many bodies, so many sicknesses, makes the air heavy and hard to breathe. You close your eyes and listen, trying to separate the individual threads of sound from the great, tangled knot of noise. You hear a prayer, a curse, a name being called out, a sudden, sharp cry that is cut short. Each sound is a tiny, desperate story, a final, fading broadcast from a collapsing world. You drift in and out of a light, feverish sleep. You are awakened by a sudden stillness beside you. The man to your right, the one whose every breath had been a rattling battle, is now silent. The struggle is over. His chest does not move. His eyes are half open, staring at the vaulted ceiling with a dull, glassy indifference. He is gone. There is no ceremony, no moment of recognition. His death is a simple administrative fact, a vacancy that needs to be filled. A nun notices, makes the sign of the cross with a weary, automatic gesture, and moves on. Soon, two men in leather aprons arrive. They are not monks or healers. They are laborers, their faces hard, their movements efficient. They are the hospital's undertakers. Without a word, they take hold of the dead man's limbs, wrap him in the thin, coarse blanket he was lying on, and lift him from the pallet. His body is limp, a sack of cooling flesh and bone. They carry him out of the ward, his bare feet dragging for a moment on the stone floor. Another nun follows, carrying a bucket of water and a rag. She scrubs at the stone where the body lay, a perfunctory cleaning, and then scatters a handful of fresh, dry straw onto the pallet. The space is ready for its next occupant. The whole process takes less than 5 minutes. Lunch is a repeat of breakfast, more thin, tasteless gruel. This time it is accompanied by a small cup of watered-down sour wine. It is not for enjoyment. It is medicine, believed to clean the blood and lift the spirits. You drink it, and the acidity burns in your empty stomach. You watch the others. Some drink it greedily. Some push it away. Some are too weak to lift the cup to their own lips. A young boy, his face covered in the angry pustules of the pox, begins to cry, the sour wine stinging the sores around his mouth. A nun gently takes the cup from him, her face for a moment showing a flicker of something that might be pity. The afternoon is a long, slow descent. The light in the ward begins to fade, the shafts of sun retreating up the stone walls. The shadows lengthen, stretching like dark fingers from pallet to pallet, connecting the sick and the dying in a web of gloom. The air grows cooler, and a damp chill seems to rise from the floor. The sounds of the ward become more subdued, the frantic energy of the midday fevers replaced by a deep, collective weariness. It feels like the entire room is taking a long, slow, final breath. You watch a spider meticulously building a web in the corner of a window frame, its patient, silent work, a strange counterpoint to the chaotic, noisy dissolution of the human lives below. A new patient is brought in, a young woman carried on a makeshift stretcher by her father and brother. Her face is flushed, her eyes bright with the plague's fever. She has a swollen, painful-looking lump under her arm, the dreaded bubo. Her family lays her down on the newly vacated pallet, the one where the man died this morning. The father presses a coin into a nun's hand, a desperate, useless bribe for better care. He whispers something to his daughter, his face a mask of anguish, before he and his son are ushered out. The girl lies on the pallet, alone now, staring up at the ceiling, her fear a palpable thing in the thickening gloom. You realize the true purpose of this place. It is not to save lives. It is to contain death. By gathering the sick and the dying here, the city outside can maintain a semblance of order. The hospital is a quarantine, a ghetto of the terminally ill. It keeps the horror centralized, hidden away behind thick stone walls, allowing those who are still healthy to pretend that the world is not ending. You and everyone else in this room are a necessary sacrifice, your collective suffering a public service. You are the wall that protects the city, a wall made of dying flesh and bone, and it is a wall that is crumbling, one body at a time. As evening bleeds into night, the ward transforms. The last of the natural light vanishes, and the cavernous room is plunged into a profound darkness, broken only by a few flickering tallow lamps placed high on the walls. The shadows become monstrous, turning the familiar shapes of the room into a landscape of dread. The faces of your fellow patients are lost in the gloom, and they become disembodied sounds. A cough from the darkness, a sob from the corner, a delirious shout that echoes in the vast empty space above. The night is a different country, with its own terrifying rules. The fevers return with the darkness. The delirium that had receded during the afternoon comes roaring back, fueled by the terrors of the night. A man starts shouting at an unseen enemy, his voice raw with rage. A woman begins to sing a child's lullaby, her voice thin and haunting, a song of innocence in a place that has none. The night ward is a chorus of fractured minds, a symphony of last words and forgotten memories. You pull your thin blanket tighter around you, not against the cold, but as a flimsy shield against the madness that seems to be seeping out of the walls, a madness as contagious as any disease. A single monk makes the rounds, his lantern casting a moving circle of light that drifts through the darkness like a lonely star. He is the night watch. He carries a bucket of water and a ladle, offering a drink to those who are conscious enough to ask. He murmurs prayers for the dying, his voice a low, steady drone that is both comforting and terrifying. You watch his shadow loom and recede, a giant, dark angel moving through the rows of the damned. He does not stop for long at any one pallet. There are too many. His work is not to comfort, but simply to witness. The woman who was brought in this afternoon begins to scream. It is not a sound of pain, but of pure, undiluted terror. She is seeing things in the darkness, her mind set ablaze by the plague. The monk hurries to her side, his lantern illuminating her sweat-soaked face and wild eyes. He speaks to her in a low, calming voice, but she does not hear him. He holds the ladle of water to her lips, but she strikes it away. There is nothing he can do. He can only wait for the fire in her brain to burn itself out. Her screams continue for what feels like an eternity before dissolving into weak, exhausted sobs. You close your eyes, trying to find a refuge in the darkness behind your own eyelids, but there is no escape. The sounds of the ward are the soundtrack to your own feverish thoughts. You think of your small, empty room, of your brother's dusty boots by the door. You try to remember what fresh air smelled like, what a meal with flavor tasted like, what silence felt like. The memories are distant and faded, like stories about someone else's life. This ward, this pallet, this chorus of the dying, this is reality now. This is the entire world. Sleep, when it finally comes, is not a peaceful release. It is a descent into a different kind of chaos. You dream of falling, of drowning, of being chased through endless twisting corridors that all look like this hospital ward. You dream of faces, some you know, some you don't, all of them marked by sickness. You wake up with a start, your heart pounding, your body slick with sweat. You do not know if you have been asleep for minutes or hours. The darkness is absolute. The sounds of suffering are unchanged. The night is a single, unbroken moment of dread. Sometime before dawn, you become aware of a new sound, or rather, the absence of one. The screaming girl is now quiet. The monk with the lantern is standing over her pallet, his head bowed. He stays there for a long time, a silent statue in the flickering light. Then he makes the sign of the cross, covers her face with her blanket, and moves on. Another space is opened up. Another life has been processed and filed away. The relentless, quiet efficiency of the place is, in its own way, more terrifying than any scream. You lie in the pre-dawn chill, listening to the breathing of those who are left. It is a ragged, uneven chorus. You find yourself counting the seconds between each rasping inhale and shuddering exhale, as if you are timing the final moments of a world. You are no longer a person. You are a pair of ears in the darkness, a consciousness adrift in an ocean of decay. You have spent one day and one night in this place, and it has already remade you. You have learned the hospital's rhythm, the terrible, predictable cadence of its work. It is the rhythm of death itself, steady and patient and unstoppable, and you simply lie there, listening and waiting your turn to join the silence. But you do not join the silence. Against all logic, against the statistical certainty of this place, you wake up one morning, and the fire behind your eyes has been reduced to embers. The shivering subsides, replaced by a profound, bone-deep weakness. But it is the weakness of a battle survived, not one that is being lost. You are a statistical anomaly, a rounding error in death's meticulous ledger. The nun who brings your morning gruel looks at you with a flicker of something that is not pity, but a kind of weary astonishment, as if a piece of furniture had suddenly spoken. You spend another week in that cavern of despair, slowly regaining a ghost of your former strength, watching the pallets around you empty and fill. You are a spectator now, a ghost who has overstayed his welcome at the seance, and you know it is time to leave before the house changes its mind. Stepping out of the hospital and back into the weak, gray sunlight is a violent rebirth. The air, for all its dangers, feels impossibly fresh, a clean shock to lungs that have breathed only the concentrated vapor of sickness and death. The city looks different. Or perhaps you are the one who is different. The world seems brighter, the sounds sharper, the colors more vivid, as if a layer of grime has been scrubbed from your senses. But people give you a wide berth, a wider one than usual. They see where you have come from. They see the gaunt hollowness in your cheeks, the haunted look in your eyes. You are a curiosity and a terror, a man who walked into the furnace and somehow did not burn. You are a living taboo, a walking testament to the plague's caprice, and your survival is not a comfort to them, but a deeply unsettling mystery. In this new, emptier world, the old social order has been shattered, its pieces rearranged into a strange and morbid mosaic. Wealth still matters, of course, but it is a frantic, volatile thing. Fortunes changing hands overnight as entire families are erased. The new currency, the one that truly commands respect and fear, is survival itself. Those who have had the sickness and lived, like you, are regarded with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Are you blessed by God? Or did you make a pact with a darker power? You are a member of an exclusive and involuntary club, and its members recognize each other in the street with a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It is a silent acknowledgement that you have both seen the abyss and, for now, have been allowed to step back from the edge. The most sacred rituals, the ones that once bound communities together, have become the most dangerous. A proper burial, once a profound social and religious duty, is now an unthinkable luxury. You remember funerals from before, the solemn procession to the church, the vigil of the dead with candles burning through the night, the shared meal of remembrance. Now the only procession is the slow, creaking journey of the death cart, The vigil is kept by rats. The shared meal is a fantasy. The new ritual is brutally simple. A body is wrapped in a sheet, if the family can spare one, and left outside the door. It is a final, desperate act of quarantine, a severing of ties not just with the dead, but with the traditions that gave death its meaning. The taboo is no longer disrespecting the dead. The taboo is touching them. Yet, amidst the overwhelming presence of death, life insists on erupting in frantic, defiant bursts. You stumble upon a wedding. It is nothing like the celebrations of the old world. The ceremony is held in a small church courtyard, not inside the nave, for fear of the enclosed air. The bride wears a simple woolen dress, but she has woven a few, precious, brightly colored ribbons into her hair. The groom looks thin and pale, perhaps a recent survivor himself. There are only a handful of guests, and they stand apart from one another. A strange, socially distanced congregation. The feast afterwards is a meager affair of bread and cheese and watered wine in a tavern back room. But the laughter is loud, almost hysterical. This is not a union planned for a long and prosperous future. It is a desperate gamble, a seizing of a fleeting moment of joy in a world where next month is a distant, uncertain country. The faith of your fathers, once a solid bedrock, now feels like shifting sand. The church promised that piety and prayer would be a shield, but the plague cut through the righteous and the sinner with terrifying impartiality. You watch a religious procession snake its way through the empty streets. A priest, his face gray with fatigue, carries a gilded reliquary said to contain the finger bone of a saint. A small, haggard crowd follows, chanting prayers, their voices thin and reedy in the open air. But there is a desperate, hollow quality to the ritual. They are going through the motions, clinging to a formula that has already failed. You see people in the crowd holding their own talismans, a rabbit's foot, a pouch of herbs, a strange-looking stone. God, it seems, has gone silent, and in his absence, people are turning to older, quieter, more personal gods, hoping that someone, anyone, is listening. The city now runs on a new set of rules, an unwritten code of superstitions. You see it everywhere. A woman will not leave her house without first touching the iron nail hammered into her doorframe. A man selling onions in the market has a dried toad hanging from a string around his neck, its desiccated body believed to absorb the pestilential vapors. No one will kill a spider, for they are thought to be enemies of the flies that swarm around the sick. Conversely, a black cat, once a creature of casual indifference, is now seen as a vessel of misfortune, a tiny four-legged demon, and they are hunted and killed with a ruthless fervor. The tragic irony, of course, is that with fewer cats, the rat population, the true carriers of the plague's fleas, quietly and contentedly explodes. Every superstition is a tiny prayer, a small, desperate attempt to impose order on a world ruled by a terrifying and invisible logic. Rumors spread faster than the sickness itself, a contagion of the mind. There are no printed papers for the common folk, but stories travel by word of mouth, mutating and growing with each telling. In a tavern you hear a man whispering, his voice low and urgent, that he heard from a carter who heard from a boatman that the plague is not a natural disease at all. It is a conspiracy. He speaks of a plot by outsiders, by lepers, by the Jewish community, to poison the city's wells and wipe out all good Christians. It is a comforting lie, because it transforms a faceless random horror into a story with villains. It provides a target for the fear and rage that would otherwise have nowhere to go. This whispered story is more deadly than any poison, a sickness of the soul that will demand a sacrifice of blood to cure itself. The tavern has become the new confessional, the new town square. But the mood is a strange, volatile cocktail of gallows humor and reckless abandon. With so many dead, inheritances have been paid out to people who never expected to see a single gold coin in their lives. A young man who was a cooper's apprentice a month ago now sits at a table, dressed in his dead master's fine clothes, buying rounds of ale for a crowd of new friends. He drinks with a frantic energy, as if he is trying to outrun the ghost of the man whose purse he now carries. The old virtues of thrift and patience are dead. The new philosophy is simple. Eat, drink, and spend, for tomorrow you will almost certainly be collected by the carter. The social taboo against unseemly haste in enjoying an inheritance has been replaced by the fear of dying before you get a chance to spend it. Ultimately, the most profound and sacred taboo to be shattered is the one concerning your own body. For your entire life, you understood community through touch. A handshake to seal a deal, a hug for a returning relative, the press of bodies in a crowded church. Now, all of that is gone. Your body, and the body of every person you meet, is a potential source of annihilation. You learn a new and intricate dance of avoidance. You flatten yourself against a wall to let someone pass. You hold your breath when you walk through a narrow alley. You watch a mother pull her child back from a friend with a sharp, panicked gesture. A simple cough, once a minor annoyance, is now a social crime that can clear a room. This constant, low-level terror of physical contact rewires your brain, transforming the most basic human impulse for connection into an act of profound and terrifying risk. You are left in the quiet aftermath, a ghost in a city of ghosts, but the silence begins to change. It is no longer the heavy, suffocating silence of mass death, but a thinner, more hollow quiet, filled with the echo of absence and the hesitant beginnings of a new world. The men who run the city, those who survived by luck or by having a very deep cellar, emerge blinking into the pale sunlight and realize they are now the landlords of a graveyard. And with that realization comes a new and terrifying kind of clarity. They begin to pass laws born not of morality, but of pure, pragmatic fear. Men are hired for the sole purpose of clearing refuse from the streets, their work not a matter of civic pride but of existential terror. They create the first, clumsy quarantine laws, decreeing that ships from afflicted ports must wait at anchor, their crews and cargo held in a floating limbo. If you have ever been grateful for the simple, unthinking act of throwing away your trash into a bin that is magically emptied, you owe a small, silent debt to the sheer, panicked horror of these men. The world's most brutal and effective labor negotiation has just concluded, and the workers have won by default, simply by surviving. With half the hands in the kingdom rotting under the soil, you and every other living soul who knows how to plow a field, shoe a horse, or weave a bolt of cloth have become impossibly precious. The old bonds of serfdom, which tied a man to the land like a piece of livestock, begin to crack and fray. You hear stories of peasants abandoning their ancestral villages, walking away from their lords to find a new master who will pay them in actual coin, not just the right to exist. For the first time, you hear a new and dangerous word whispered in taverns and marketplaces: wages. Laws are passed to try and freeze pay, to force people back into the old order. But it is like trying to legislate against the tide. The world has been broken, and the pieces will not go back the same way. The very idea that your time and your skill have a price, a concept as fundamental to the modern world as breathing, was bought with an ocean of blood. The physician with his powdered gems and the apothecary with his viper's flesh are now figures of quiet contempt. Their grand theories and expensive potions failed so spectacularly, so utterly, that the very foundation of their knowledge has been revealed as sand. In their place, a new kind of practitioner gains a grim and grudging respect: the surgeon. He is a craftsman, not a scholar, a man who works with his hands, who has seen the inside of a human body, who understands the brutal mechanics of flesh and bone. The taboo against dissection, against the unholy act of opening a corpse to see how it works, begins to weaken. The plague has provided an endless supply of research material, and a few brave, morbidly curious men start to look, to draw, to document. They are not yet scientists, but they are the first to choose the evidence of their own eyes over the authority of an ancient text. If you have ever been healed by a doctor who trusts a microscope more than a horoscope, their work began here, in the charnel houses of a shattered continent. The trauma of it all seeps into the very soul of the world, emerging in art that is both grotesque and beautiful. You see it in the new paintings on church walls, the dance macabre, the dance of death. A skeletal figure, grinning with empty sockets, leads a procession to the grave. He takes the hand of a king in his ermine robes, a pope in his finery, a knight in his armor, a merchant with his purse, a peasant with his hoe. All are equal in this final, grim conga line. This is not just a morbid fantasy. It is the most radical and undeniable truth of your new world. The plague was the great leveler, the one force that did not respect wealth or status or piety. This art is the culture's attempt to process an incomprehensible reality, to find a sliver of meaning in the chaos. The idea that no one is above the rules, a concept that would one day fuel revolutions and build democracies, was first sketched out by the skeletal hand of the Grim Reaper, a silent and impartial choreographer. The silence of God during the plague was the most deafening sound of all. The prayers went unanswered, the pious died alongside the sinner, and the church, the great and unshakable pillar of the world, was proven to be just as helpless as everyone else. For many, faith did not die, but it was profoundly changed. It became a smaller, quieter, more personal thing. If the grand institution could not save you, then perhaps salvation was a private matter between you and your Creator, a conversation that required no intermediary. This seed of doubt, this quiet turning inward, would lie dormant for a time, but it would eventually sprout into a fire that would splinter the monolithic church and reshape the spiritual map of the world. The very notion of a private, individual conscience, the idea that you are the ultimate authority on your own soul, was a quiet and desperate conclusion reached by millions who looked to the heavens for an answer and were met with a profound, terrifying, and ultimately liberating silence. And so, you stand in the twilight of one age and the dim, uncertain dawn of another. The ghosts are still there, their absence a permanent scar on the landscape, but the air is no longer thick with the same immediate terror. It is filled now with the sounds of hammers and saws, the clatter of rebuilding, the hesitant laughter of a wedding party. The world you were born into is gone forever, dissolved by an invisible tide. But in its place, something new is being built, constructed from the rubble by the hands of the few who remain. Our world, the one of convenience and science, of individual rights and public health, is a house built on a foundation of their bones. It is a legacy written in silence, a story told by the spaces where people used to be. And as you find your own place in this strange, quiet, emptier world, you can feel the profound and simple truth of it all. The story did not end. It was simply waiting for a new chapter to be written.